Hello, and welcome to Breast Cancer Conversations, a podcast brought to you by survivingbreastcancer.org. I am Laura Carfing, breast cancer survivor and founder of survivingbreastcancer.org, a nonprofit organization providing community, education, and resources to empower those diagnosed with breast cancer and their caregivers from day one and beyond. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Breast Cancer Conversations. I am so glad you guys are here and joining us for this amazing episode with Dianne Faure. We are going to talk about energy medicine, and I am just so excited to get started. Dianne Faure is an attorney, author, teacher, advanced Eden energy medicine practitioner, and massage therapist. Dianne credits the Eden method with helping her resolve multiple health issues, including chronic pain, allergies, rheumatoid arthritis, skin lupus, and connective tissue disease. From 2017 to 2020, Dianne was part of the medical staff at the Chasey Health Institute, a primary care integrative practice. In addition to treating patients, she designed and taught dozens of Eden energy medicine classes on various topics including stress, hormone health, and weight management. In 2021, Dianne was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer, a rare aggressive form of breast cancer. She decided to track her experience and incorporate her energy medicine tools to help manage the treatment and its side effects. In 2024, she published her memoir self-help book entitled Cancer and Energy Medicine, A Healing Journey. Since finishing her cancer treatment, Dianne has resumed her private energy medicine practice. Using the techniques featured in her book, she teaches cancer patients, survivors, and their loved ones how energy medicine can help them on their healing journey.
So energy medicine is a very broad umbrella. It includes acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine. You could make an argument that yoga is a kind of energy medicine. Reiki is energy medicine. So there's many different modalities sort of under the energy medicine umbrella.
Welcome to the conversation. So I know there's a lot of things we want to dive into today, not only about your own experience being diagnosed with breast cancer, but the work that you're doing and have done. You've published a book. You have some really great insights with regards to energy medicine and your own private practice. And you were also diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer. So let's just start at the very beginning. Tell me about your diagnosis and experience with breast cancer, and then we'll get into the book and all things energy medicine related.
Sure. So I was diagnosed in April 2021, and I had a full-time energy medicine practice in the DC metro area. And I had to basically shut down my practice, and I moved to the Boston area in order to be treated. And so I was given the standard IBC treatment, which is the 6 rounds of chemotherapy, radical mastectomy, and the radiation. There's typically 35 rounds of radiation, but I didn't get 35 rounds. And so when I was diagnosed, I was trying to find a book that could sort of give me an idea, like, what can I expect? Like, what am I going to feel like with radiation? What is chemotherapy like? Like, I had no idea what I was going to be going through. Actually, I had a slight idea because my son had cancer, so that's a whole nother story. But for the first time, I was really, the patient here. So I really wanted to understand what to expect. And I couldn't find a book anywhere that could really kind of give me a roadmap. So that was part of what motivated me to write the book, was to be able to explain to people what to expect as you journey on that road. Of course, we're all different, but just kind of the general parameters. So I started keeping a journal. And then I also wanted to empower people because I was in treatment one day getting my chemotherapy infusion, and the woman across from me went into anaphylactic shock, and the woman next to me started vomiting violently, and the nurse was telling her, there's nothing we can do to help you. So I was thinking, wow, I've got all these tools at my disposal. I mean, I've got these things that I can use that, in helping with my side effects, help me handle the treatment, not just physically, but also emotionally. And so then I made the decision, okay, I want to share this with others to help them get through their treatments, and not just get through their treatments, but to really thrive afterwards, not to be defined by your cancer experience.
Tell me a little bit about inflammatory breast cancer. How did you find out that you had cancer? Was it through a routine mammogram? How did it present itself?
So, I had, as I said, I had already an energy medicine practice. I'm also a massage therapist, and I specialize actually in cancer clients. I Because my son had cancer, I knew a lot about cancer. My son had been diagnosed with acute lymphatic leukemia when he was 8. So we had a 3-year journey, way back when. And so I was very familiar with the cancer process. And so I would help my clients sort of get through the cancer experience with the energy medicine component. Um, and so it was in April of 2021 that I started to notice that my breast was kind of getting hot and it was painful. And my daughters, I have 2 daughters, and both of them had just given birth within a week of each other.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations. That's like really exciting.
So, and they developed mastitis. So I was like, maybe it's like, sympathetic mastitis or something. I just didn't really think it was breast cancer because breast cancer doesn't come on, virtually overnight. So I went to, so I scheduled a mammogram and I couldn't get an appointment for a couple weeks. And so the symptoms just kept getting worse. So I went to an emergency room and they put me on antibiotics. They thought it was like an infection, but they advised me to go see a breast specialist. So a couple of weeks later, the antibiotics were a little bit helpful, but not really. After a while, it didn't really seem to work anymore. So then I went to the breast specialist, and she seemed to think it was something called granicular mastitis, which is extremely rare and can also develop virtually overnight.
And the symptoms continued to be like the hotness and then the discomfort and the pain?
Yes, and I've started to feel pain in like my armpit and that sort of thing. And then I'm also, so in addition, backstory is I have a lot of autoimmune issues. So I already had something called skin lupus. And so if I take a medication, after a while, I start to develop an allergic reaction to it. So I was getting an allergic reaction to the antibiotics. And so I knew that, that was a problem for me. So they decided before they did the surgery to do a breast biopsy. And when they created the incision, I was in so much pain I couldn't move. I just never experienced anything like that in my life. And the staff had never seen anything like that in their lives. They just didn't understand why I was reacting this way to this biopsy. So eventually, I just laid there for 3 hours on the table, couldn't move. And eventually I was by myself because it was COVID, and eventually managed to drive myself home. And then within 3 days, they called with the diagnosis. So I had to pretty much drop everything and just change my life, which is what I did.
So hard to relive that. Thank you for sharing that and taking us back to that moment of, you know, not just self-advocacy and how hard it is to even just get appointments to see some of these specialists and the doctors and being, I don't know if like the word exactly is misdiagnosed, but like, when we realize that when you go see the doctor, it's not a perfect science. It's this, hypothesis, trial and error, testing. Let's try and, see maybe it's something else. We don't want to just assume cancer, right? So, we want to get all of the workup done to see like really what's going on. And so, especially with something like inflammatory breast cancer that doesn't present itself necessarily with a lump and some of these other symptoms that a lot of doctors might not be aware of, especially depending on where you're getting seen. So, I think just knowing, first of all, for anyone who's listening, understanding that breast cancer can present itself in other fashions. And then also knowing that, like, to keep asking if you're not feeling comfortable because you know your body the best.
Right. Absolutely.
I am so intrigued by your energy medicine practice. Tell me about this. So, like, even before cancer, you said that you started to get into this even with like your son and your experience with cancer. But what is energy medicine? Let's just like start there.
So, energy medicine is a very broad umbrella. It includes acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine. You could make an argument that yoga is a kind of energy medicine. Reiki is energy medicine. So, there's many different modalities sort of under the energy medicine umbrella. So the one that I'm trained in is something called Eden Energy Medicine, and that is a woman named Donna Eden, and she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in her 30s, and the doctors told her she needed to put her affairs in order, that she wasn't going to live to raise her children. So she became desperate to stay alive, and she can see and sense energy. So she just started working with the energies in and around her body, and eventually healed herself of multiple sclerosis. And that was about 45 years ago. She's in her 80s now, and she's, you'd never know that she went through that. And she had a practice on the West Coast, actually. Well, I was trained in Phoenix, but she's on the West Coast, California. And she had practiced for 40 years, and her husband is a clinical psychologist who had his own separate practice. And she said, "Could you help me write this book? I want to write a book about energy medicine." So he and she together compiled this book. And the name of the book is Energy Medicine by Donna Eden. So, so I was suffering. So originally I'm an attorney. I'm trained as an attorney. So I was practicing law for several years, and started to get sick and started to develop a lot of autoimmune issues. So I had like chronic health issues most of my adult life, chronic back pain. I had back surgery that wasn't successful, chronic allergies, chronic sinusitis. I just had like a compilation of I was always sick with something. Um, and then as I got older, I started to develop rheumatoid arthritis, connective tissue disease, and lupus. And I really couldn't walk up the steps. I really couldn't. I was in tremendous pain. And so I was pretty desperate and willing to try anything. And so even though I sort of was open to alternative things, because my son, when he was diagnosed with cancer, I learned reflexology at that time because he was having severe side effects from the chemotherapy. So I would learn how to, massage his feet so that would get rid of the pain. So I was already open to that sort of thing anyway. But then when I got so sick and allergic to medications, then I needed to really try something else. So it was a lifesaver for me. I studied 4 years for the original training with Donna out in Phoenix, and then I did additional training to be able to certify others. And so I went back to the practice of law for a couple years because I could finally work again. And then I decided I really didn't like the practice of law. This was a lot more fun. I wasn't sick anymore, and my husband's a medical doctor. So he was like, I've got these patients and we've done all the tests, and would you be willing to see them? And very reluctantly, little by little, I started to see clients. So that was I did that kind of one foot in one world for several years, and then decided I needed to make a decision. So I went to get another degree. So I got I got a massage license degree, and so then I put out my shingle and started a practice. And I, within learning the techniques, within 6 months to a year, like all my previous symptoms had disappeared. Um, so I no longer had the lupus. I no longer had the rheumatoid arthritis, the connective tissue disease, or anything like that.
And you think that is all through like this energy that you were able to
Oh yeah.
heal
No,
yourself?
yeah, definitely. The energy medicine healed me, or I
I'm
healed myself.
so
Yeah.
right through that energy
Yeah.
medicine.
Yeah.
I'm so intrigued because I feel like we hear these stories. And so I too am also very open to all of what, and I don't know all the terms, right? Like complementary approaches, energy healing, functional medicine, alternative medicine, complementary, however we want to talk about it. But, you know, and I don't know if you know this about me. I know my listeners do because I talk about it all the time. But when I was diagnosed, I was very active and a strict vegan at the time. I became a vegetarian at the age of 16, eventually turned vegan along that journey, and then was diagnosed with breast cancer at 34. And so as I kind of was starting off of like saying, how could this happen to me? I was very healthy and I thought I was doing everything quote unquote right. what is going on. And I don't know if this was your experience also with like your law practice, and I'm not making assumptions, but just to kind of like connect the dots with my own experience of being in a very stressful work environment. When I got diagnosed with breast cancer, it literally required me to like stop everything. I remember I was going to be speaking at a conference coming up. I was leading a cohort of students down to Chile on an excursion abroad. And all of these things were coming up that I literally had to like call my boss and call colleagues and cancel. And that was devastating, first of all, to not follow through on things that I was committed to. So, the ego was a little sad at that moment. But, at the same time, it was like, it literally took cancer to make me stop in my tracks and focus on me and put that like A type to the side. And, I don't know, like, I think we hear like, right, stress kills, stress is a killer, all of these things. But it's so hard because we live in this society where it's like go go go, it's the rat race. You got to work harder, you got to like earn more, get to the top of the scale, etc. And then cancer enabled me, I guess, now to say also like I now have so much better perspective. I now know what matters more to me. I now understand like work life balance, if there is even such a thing, but like what brings me joy and how I can bring joy into other people's worlds. And so I think you and I have some similarities too when you were mentioning kind of straddling the corporate world with starting your own practice and then dabbling in all of these other therapies to like heal yourself. I feel like I'm in that role too now, like higher education and then the nonprofit, taking that experience with education and now educating people through breast cancer, like what's next, what's happening. But I definitely want to heal myself too. So I don't know if you're taking new clients, but like I definitely want to be like a client of yours. Like I want to learn more about all of these great things and techniques to help with some of the symptoms. It sounds like you were doing this for a while then before your own diagnosis with cancer. And then you were able to utilize these energy healing techniques to help you navigate some of the symptoms through chemotherapy.
Yeah, so similar to you, I was working long hours because I hadn't been able to work for so many years because I was so sick and I had so much energy and I felt so great and I just like wanted to do this and I sometimes was working 7 days a week, seeing, 6 clients a day. I was just like, just not taking the time out for myself. And then my daughter, I had grandchildren. I was flying back and forth between DC and Massachusetts and just like trying to be everything to everybody. Right. And I do see that I have seen that pattern oftentimes for women with breast cancer. We tend to be the ones that want to help or the givers. We're the ones that want to serve, all that sort of thing. And it's a hard lesson to learn to just sort of, know that you've got limitations, respect those limitations, balance that work-life balance. So now I'm seeing clients again, but I'm not working 7 days a week and I'm not seeing 6 people a day, So yeah, so definitely
Those
that
healthy boundaries, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So, and in my case, I did dramatic things. I left DC, I moved to Massachusetts, like, things that I already had a house here. And so that was like a vacation house. But it was a place where I could feel at peace and be in nature. And like, that's really what I needed. Like, I needed to stop the rat race and just like be in nature and get in touch with myself and and heal myself again. So like you said before, it's really a constellation of many different um realizations and understandings about how do I heal myself, how do I balance myself. So energy, I did 33 different modalities when I went through my cancer treatment. I was totally open to anything. And so that I was willing to do that. I totally changed my diet. It's like I did so many things that the way I say in the book, it's sort of like, oftentimes we think, well, one day I'll do such and such, or, one day when I have the time, I'll do X, Y, or Z, right? Well, when you get a cancer diagnosis, suddenly that's the time, right? And are you willing to make those changes, because your life can depend upon it. And so that was sort of the way I I analyzed it was, okay, so what is it that I haven't been listening to, the voice within my own self, to be able to say, okay, this is the change that I need to make and that I wanted to make. So that's how I made the choices.
We have this amazing practitioner on our team who leads our meditation practice on Mondays, who is also a breast cancer survivor herself out of Canada. And when she approached me about wanting to lead meditation, she's like, Laura, no one ever has time for meditation. You hear them all the time. I don't have time for this, or maybe one day when I have more time. She was like, we're going to do it on Mondays from 10 a.m. until 10:15. People will find 15 minutes to tune in and meditate together. 4 years later, it is now this like amazing community. We get new people dropping in all the time, but there's those regulars that show up every single Monday and like meditate together. And to the point now where we've started recording some of our meditations so people who can't make that time can get on demand, et cetera, through our platform. But again, just it doesn't have to be all or nothing in terms of like you're not running the marathon. You don't need to work out for 60 minutes a day. Like it could be these like little bite-sized chunks where you're still receiving those benefits.
Yeah, I call those yin breaks. So in energy
There's a
medicine,
name for it. I love it. Okay.
in energy medicine, we work off of Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. So there's a lots of comparisons or correlations between those two. And as you mentioned before, that type A personality, that's very yang energy. There's a lot of yang energy. And particularly as women, we try to maintain that very yang lifestyle. And we tend to deny the yin parts of ourselves or the parts of life that are yin, things like meditation, things like qigong, things like energy medicine. And the more we can start to focus on those things, the less our body needs to go into that stress response.
I feel like some of us are just constantly operating at that high stress, high cortisol, on
Yes.
fire, inflamed
Yes.
level.
100%. Yes.
That
Yes.
causes dis-ease, which is like that discomfort, dis-ease is like.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
So tell me more, like, I don't even know what questions to ask about energy medicine. Like I'm looking
I can
around
tell
my
you.
my own office actually, right? Like you can see like in the background I have my books. I'm all about like the visuals with like the rainbows. I haven't even opened this up. I got like different assorted fragrances or like essential oils because all of a sudden I
Nice.
was like really interested in like aromatherapy and
Yeah.
everything. And so I'm
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
anything I could use to like help, calm,
Another yin
relax.
practice. Yes. Very
Okay,
yin. Yes.
great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
So I
unopened though,
think
so I need to open them, but like
yes, yes, yes. So, I mean, energy medicine, as I mentioned before, this particular type of energy medicine is based in Chinese medicine. So, Chinese medicine talks about meridians. So, do you understand what meridians are?
I know a little bit about them, that they like flow
Okay.
through us, right? We have
Yes,
certain
yes.
meridian points.
So, just like we have circulatory system, the oxygen that flows through us, the chi lines also flow through us. And so when the acupuncturist puts a needle somewhere on your body, they're tapping into that particular chi line. And so every finger and every toe is connected to a body part. So in Chinese medicine, for example, the thumb is your lung meridian. So you can work with the lung energy in your body by working with this line here. So every finger, every toe is the beginning or end point of a meridian in the body. And there are 9 energy systems in total. So the meridians are just one. So it's fairly complicated.
I'm taking notes right here. Like this is incredible. If you're listening, I hope you're like picking up your pen and paper right now.
And so many people have heard of aura, right? Their aura. So that's another and the 9 energy systems. Nowadays, a lot of people, because of yoga, they know about chakras, right? So chakras are those energy systems that are essentially feeding the endocrine system of the body. So there's an exchange of energy and information within these chakra systems. An electrical system within the body is the system that Western medicine can measure with the EKG or EEG. That's one of the 9 energy systems. So we work with all of them and try to bring them into balance.
So like when a client comes to see you, like what does that experience entail? Like what's the intake and how do you assess?
So we use something called energy testing. And so, for example, we will use a biofeedback mechanism through asking the body questions. So, for example, every muscle in the body is connected to one of those meridians. So I can take energy out of a muscle by pinching that muscle here, and then I will get a weak response in my testing, and then I can give energy to that muscle. So first, what I want to do is I want to establish a baseline by using something called what some people call muscle testing, but we call it energy testing because we're getting feedback information from the meridian that's flowing through that particular test that's associated with that meridian. So once I have a baseline, then I can start asking the body questions like, what is your stress level? Which meridians are out of balance? I can get all kinds of different information. What's the priority system for your body right now at this particular time? And then the body will give me that information. Then I balance the body on a massage table. So in other words, if like your stress level shows that you're operating at a very active sympathetic nervous response, right? Then we work with either points on the head or certain points on the body that we sedate that stress response. And then we give you tools that you can use at home so that you can keep your body in that more parasympathetic nervous response, because that's the ideal, right?
Thank you for explaining that. I mean, one, I didn't even know that there were 9 different energy systems that we can work with. And then secondly, too, I'm curious because this is something I've been trying to acquire a little bit more of myself, and even just like reading through books of trying to be more self-aware and more attuned with, nature and universe and the ebbs and flows of like life in general, is this idea of intuition. And so when you're talking about the body and understanding this baseline, whether it's like the muscles or the energy, the auras, et cetera, when I hear that, because I'm not professionally trained by any means, but this idea of like quieting the mind and then really allowing that intuition to like speak to me so I have the answer or can figure out what the actual like root cause of something is. I don't know, like, can you tell me a little bit more like how you read these, not symptoms, but like responses, or I guess nuggets to help you understand the energy?
You mentioned meditation. So the value of meditation is essentially doing the same thing, right? So it's quieting the beta, like the monkey mind that they call in yoga, right? It's quieting the beta brain waves and bringing the body and mind and body into an alpha wave state. So it's calming that stress response. Um, so a big part of healing the body is bringing that stress response back into balance. So many, if not most people in our society are functioning at a heightened stress response, what we call stress reactivity, right? So it's like driving your car, like you drive your car at 30 miles an hour, but then for some reason you can drive it at 80 miles an hour because that's what's required of you, and then you don't know how to go back to 30 miles an hour. You just stay at the 80 miles an hour, right? And so you can get stuck at that, right? And the problem with that is the same energy system that governs stress response also governs the immune system. And that's why 80 to 90% of all disease is actually stress related, because if we continue operating at this heightened stress response, the immune system will suffer.
Well, let me change gears a little bit. I mean, I feel like I could talk to hours, so we'll definitely like talk more. But tell me more about your book, the name of your book. We started talking a little bit about like how do we navigate some of these symptoms with chemotherapy. Like you needed a roadmap. You wanted to find information. We don't always want to just go to Dr. Google because that can be incredibly scary as well. So as you're writing your book, one, I would love to know the name of it, where people can find it, get it. And then also, do you talk about these modalities and techniques also in your book?
Yes. So it's called Cancer and Energy Medicine: A Healing Journey by Dianne Faure. And you can find it Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of the big retailers.
I'm going to put you on the spot. I want a signed copy.
Happy to do so. And so essentially, the first half of the book is my memoir.
Okay.
It's the story of my diagnosis. And it really, it goes back to the story with my son, because I do think that the stress of saving his life, he ultimately needed a transplant, a stem cell transplant. And so I think navigating and working through all that, because that was 3 or 4 years out of our lives, sort of set me up for the autoimmune and the other health issues that I was struggling with for so long. So I sort of give that background story, and then the diagnosis. Um, and that's the first half of the book. I unfortunately, I was one of these people who, because of my autoimmune issues, I got all the side effects and then some. So, for example, I had a severe rash, a skin lupus reaction to the chemo. And I was in a lot of pain for that was probably my worst side effect, actually, was this rash that just nobody could diagnose and nobody could treat. So I share my story, and I share the roller coaster of all the appointments like you talk about. I talk about and so what I do is, as I'm telling my story, I start to give little snippets of what could you do energy medicine wise to get you through that situation. So when I share my story, I talk about energy terms, about like stress, for example, and then I give you the example of how you can solve the problem. Okay. So that's the first half of the book. And then the second half of the book, I go into much more detail about the energy medicine piece itself. So the second half is really the self-help part. So let me get to that. And by the way, so I incorporate not just chemo, surgery, radiation, but also recovery. I realize that last piece is huge, because a lot of people, they just rise to the occasion, they get through whatever they got to get through, and then they crash, or they're depressed, or they're stuck in grief. Like it's so easy to not be able to move through that, that whole process and come out the other side. In some ways, I feel like I'm better than I was before, which is pretty amazing. So, so that is, that was my goal. My goal was to be able to get through the other side and, not be defined by my cancer experience. So,
And to also
s-
allow yourself to like realize what you just went through. I think you're
yes,
absolutely right. It was like go,
yeah,
go, go. And then I was like back at work all of a sudden. And all the papers started piling up again on my desk. Everyone was like, "Oh, you're back. Your hair's growing back. You look healthy. Welcome back. Here's all the work that you missed."
oh,
And I was like,
geez,
"Whoa, whoa, whoa." I just like that's when it hit me. It was almost like
yeah,
1 year after all of the active treatment that
right,
like years 1 and 2 post diagnosis was
yeah,
really hard for me. I
very
know
hard,
and I'm 7 years out and it's still hard. Like there's still new side effects that are showing up with
yeah,
long-term side effects of some of the
right,
harsh chemotherapies that we were on. So like allowing your
right,
body and your mind and yourself to accept that we just went through something quite traumatic and it
yes,
doesn't just like go away.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that you're reminding me, that was the other thing that I was very aware of because of my son, was what they call late effects. And we go through, sometimes you go through these processes that we don't really understand what's the potential down the road in terms of this could be something I'm living with forever. So like you say, and then you don't know when they're going to go away or not go away. So that was always in the back of my mind as I was going through my treatment and doing the energy medicine part, was, preventing these things from sort of taking on a life of their own. So I talk about that in the the second half of the book. This title is called Energy Medicine Boot Camp. So I explain in that, the details of how our brain works, even though I'm not a scientist, but how it works energetically. And then I start to show you holds and exercises that you can do to help start to manage the treatments that you have. Um, so this, people will do energy medicine totally independent of a medical issue, but this book was designed to be used in conjunction with traditional Western medicine. So each chapter, so there's a chapter on chemotherapy, for example. What are the exercises that you can do that will help you with nausea or indigestion or loss of hair? There are things that you can do energetically that will help your hair grow back faster. Simple things that you can do that are literally at your fingertips. How to handle joint pain. Here's something for joint pain. Like, what can you do to help the energies move through your joints so that you're not constantly in pain? Fatigue is huge, right? When you're going through that, what are some things that you can do on your body that will start to move the energy so that you can have less fatigue? So that's the second half of second half of the book. And it's also the other audience that I've written this for is for caretakers and loved ones, because I know with my son, when you're going through a cancer experience with someone that you love, you just feel so powerless and like, what can I do to help them? So this book is also designed for someone that loves someone with cancer. Because as you know, when you're going through cancer, the last thing you want to be doing is like reading books about how to take care of yourself.
Yes, here you go, honey. You got homework.
So, I mean, even in
The
my
book says I
case,
need a foot massage.
yeah,
So
yeah, right. Yeah. So,
Oh.
and many times you can't do a thing. You're just lying in bed, you can't move. So I was very lucky. I have a daughter that's also an energy medicine practitioner. So she could work on me. So, but these things are very straightforward. I mean, you don't need to be a practitioner. Anybody can do this work on a loved one that's going through cancer treatment, and any cancer, not just breast cancer, any cancer.
Exactly. No, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Such a great resource. We're so grateful that you took the time to not just share your story in terms of like the memoir, the first half, but really giving people solutions and tools and concrete like action steps that they can take. So they're not just suffering through the horrendous side effects of a cancer diagnosis.
Right. Yeah. And I was inspired to do this also because prior to myself getting cancer, that was what I did. I used the energy medicine tools to help my clients. And so basically what I would often do would be to, teach a spouse or a parent or something like that, like, what can you do for your loved one? So I already was walking people through that process. So that's why I knew the value of it.
Well, Diane, is there anything that we haven't yet covered that we need to cover in this short amount of time of AKA a podcast episode? Because I feel like this should be like a series or like a workshop. There's like to some degree, and again, I was just taking notes over here too, like very much so just scratching the surface. As I mentioned, like I didn't even know what question specifically to ask because this is so outside of my day-to-day work. But I know it's so valuable and so important that I'm going to go buy a book. I'm going to go practice these things. I am so excited to like help heal myself through survivorship as well, which we know is hard. So, any last thoughts or comments that you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, so the only thing that I would add is that a lot of times um, very much self-identify is our body is experiencing different energy systems within your body. You can start to have a relationship with these different systems. So so like there's a part of me that's experiencing, and once perspective, it creates space. And it work with the energies within your body to be and communicate with them creates the sense of empowerment, because you're not just passive and you're not just react, but you're taking your health back in your was something that was I know watching other people. I used to teach at Johns Hopkins Cancer and taught medical staff. I was in an integrated practice for 3 years. And so I know that people feeling not just with cancer, but just in general is feeling powerless about it. And I mean, you touched on it when you talked about intuition. Being in touch with that part knows what's best. That's really huge. Like in my case, for example, take 35 rounds of radiation. I only got 19 or 20 because my skin lupus was so bad that my body was overreacting because my body is very sensitive. So fortunately, I had a fantastic radiation oncologist, and so he knew this is the most that your body can do. That's really important, is really take ownership of your health, and work with your practitioners, but understand that you know your body the best, and making that relationship and that communication with your body, and the energy medicine can help you do that.
So beautiful. So well said. Thank you so much for sharing all of these great insights, taking the time to share your story, these resources. And I hope this is one of many more conversations. I know we're going to get a lot of questions after the podcast episode drops. So we'll definitely have you back to continue the dialogue. So thank you for
Yeah,
joining us.
you're so welcome. It's so great to meet you.
Yes, likewise. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to our show. I would like to acknowledge that all of the information on our podcast is from personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. You should always contact your medical care team. If you are looking for specific topics or would like to be a guest on our show, please feel free to reach out. My email is laura@survivingbreastcancer.org. Our show is made possible by our nonprofit, survivingbreastcancer.org, and by our incredible donors like yourself. You can hop on over to survivingbreastcancer.org to sign up for our mailing list, make a donation, and explore the 400 plus programs we offer each year at survivingbreastcancer.org/events. Until next time, keep on thriving.